Holy tongue twister, Tim. Whenever we discuss Cliff Robertson's appearances on Batman, I keep trying to say shame with an M, but thanks to the original Western, I can't stop saying Shane with an N.
Well, Paul, I know just the thing to solve this conundrum. Try saying this. The blame for shame rests mainly in Ralph Ross's brain.
All right, here goes. The blame for shame rests mainly in Ralph Ross's brain.
I think he's got it. By Jove, he's got it.
But why would I want to say that? It doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't matter, chum. It's just an elocution exercise.
Oh, right, like you say clavicle and I say clavorcle, right?
Clavorcle?
To the bat poles!
Cowabunga, welcome to the Bat Poles. This is Tim in Tokyo with my brother Paul in Hanover, New Hampshire.
Cowabunga? Don't have a cow, man.
Our theme version this time was by the Japanese surf band BCV, uploaded to YouTube March 16, 2010, recorded February 28th of that year at the MacArthur Live House in Omiya, Saitama Prefecture. I imagine it's named after General MacArthur.
Probably. It's hard to imagine. Well, what do I know? But it's just hard to imagine off the top of my head any other MacArthurs who might have been famous enough in Japan to get an auditorium named after them.
Yeah, or live house. It'd be a small
live house
venue for for small bands.
Is it called live house in like Romaji? Is it?
Yeah, Japanese call it a live house.
Okay,
it's like a little venue. Maybe it's kind of a bar or not a huge place.
Do you have to take an escalerita to get there?
I'm sorry.
Do you have to take an escalerita to get there?
Escalator,
to the live house? Yeah,
probably. Well,
that's my favorite. Japaneseified English word.
Actually, you probably have to take a stairway down.
Oh, okay.
Some that I've known of are like underground, so they don't bother the neighbors.
So is there anything in your mind that sets this version of the Ventures Batman theme apart from all the other Ventures, all the other covers of the Ventures cover of the Batman theme?
Yeah, the Japanese bands covering the Ventures cover of the Batman theme is a genre all by itself.
Absolutely.
I don't know, but I thought they did a good job.
Me too. And there's a little bit more attempt at like tremolo and different kinds of foot pedaling of the guitar tone. I mean, of course, there's the usual Dick Dale, which I think is just whammy bar stuff. But there's also some other modulation that struck me as different, and that set it apart.
Okay. Watching the video again, I finally noticed that the backdrop of the stage BCV are performing on is a portrait of, one Douglas MacArthur. Hard to imagine he'd be happy to have his name attached to a rock and roll establishment. Anyway, onward. Okay, so we're moving ahead with the Batman 66 comic book series. This is issue 10 from June 2014. And we mentioned the cover at the end of the previous Bat Poles episode. Batman and Robin in a bat snowmobile flying above Mr. Freeze's ice cream truck. And the first story, the first two-thirds of the issue, The Summer of Freeze, written by Jeff Parker, pencils by David Williams, inks and colors by Kelsey Shannon. The everyday people in this story, maybe more than the characters who are from the show, looked to me kind of like Mad Magazine characters or something.
Yeah, on the first page, there's a character in the last panel of the first half of the page, and I always think of these pages as halves because of the way they're published as a webcomic.
Mm-hmm.
Looks not too different from Alfred E. Newman if you kind of squint, or maybe Howdy Doody. Now I've got
somewhere in between.
I've got an image of Ron Howard with a Howdy Doody costume on, looking painfully at that kid in the Happy Days episode who's got lines drawn on either side of his mouth, wishing that he'd thought of that in his Howdy Doody impersonation. So, but they are caricatured a lot more, it seems, than usually. There's not that much attention paid to the civilian characters in the drawings. I don't know David Williams, do you?
I don't. I looked him up, actually. He's done a lot of work. A lot of it's DC. I think there was some Marvel in there.
Mm-hmm.
On his Twitter page, he's got a drawing of himself wearing a Batman 66 t-shirt. So I think he's one of us.
One of us. Very good. Well, he draws a heck of a beehive. There's that to say for him.
Beehive Harriet.
Even Aunt Harriet has an excellent beehive. Well, the first thing I noticed is something that has to do with our conversations rather than with the story itself. But we were reaching for which Mr. Freeze, which of the three Freezes was being represented here. And it's definitely not Eli Wallach, but rather Otto Preminger.
Right. Well, I corrected that when I was editing the previous episode.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, because I hadn't read the story yet, and all I'd seen was a flash of eyebrow. And I remembered, Eli Wallach's eyebrows, of course, but Otto Preminger's Freeze also had kind of orange, fluffy eyebrows, so I didn't see whether he was hairless or not, just from flipping through the story.
And my brain wasn't working properly at the time. I think I was Superman'd out, and I just accepted a familiar name, even though it was the wrong one.
It's a bird, it's a plane. Oh, no, thank goodness it's just a bird.
Yeah, so Otto Preminger, complete with several uses of the word wild in the story, which I appreciated.
Oh, me too. Just in case we weren't sure which of the three Freezes this is supposed to be, but, the visual caricature is pretty spot on. Well, let's see. So the story begins with it being, 99 in the shade in Gotham City, and who should come along in an ice cream truck but Mr. Freeze, who is serving one per customer cherry snow cones or ice creams. Is there any significance to the fact that he says, I only have cherry? I don't think there's any necessary cherry predilection expressed in any of his,
I don't know why that would be
episodes of Batman.
He only stocked up on cherry, I guess, because, selling ice cream was not his real goal here anyway.
Right, his real goal is to distribute these U-coolers, which are these little iPhone-sized, slightly thicker gadgets that look kind of like 60s transistor radios that create a kind of field of cold around individuals. And these things end up selling for, it's not mentioned at the beginning of the story, which feels like the cold open, right? A very cold open.
Yes.
But it turns out that these things are being sold for $2, which there's something sinister going on here. If these amazing devices to keep people cool are going for $2 a piece, clearly he wants to get volume out there.
Even in $1966, that's kind of cheap.
Well, especially for a technological marvel like this thing. Oh, I'm sorry, a technological DC. Sorry, I didn't mean to get the corporations confused.
A technological Archie.
Harvey.
Gold key. Right, so now they're selling like the proverbial hotcakes.
Even discussing this, we can't escape the hot cold jokes. The puns are everywhere.
So, meanwhile, at Stately Wayne Manor, Bruce and Dick are playing chess, and Bruce won again, presumably, with the famous Sea Cadet mate. Sure, of course, the Sea Cadet mate.
Yeah, not so sure whether that's a real thing, but I can look it up in real time here.
You mentioned caricature. Actually, Alfred is kind of caricatured here, too. I mean, he certainly looks like Alan Napier, especially in some of the close-up ones later, like in the Batcave. But the hair is kind of this exaggerated shape.
Yeah, but exaggerated in a way that tells you, even if you can't see his face very well, that's definitely Alfred. It couldn't be anybody else.
Yeah, he's Alan Napier in quotation marks, practically.
The Sea Cadet mate is in fact a real form of mate in the so-called Scotch game. That's about as much as I know about chess. So
okay. And Aunt Harriet comes in wearing a fur coat when it's 1,000,000 degrees outside, and it turns out she's got a U cooler that's making her so cold that she has to bundle up, and she's gotten ones for all of them, Alfred, Bruce, and Dick. Bruce says, "Thank you, Aunt Harriet. You know I love new technology." So then they head to the Batcave, and we got a nice little bat spin panel there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then, in the Batcave, Batman is wearing an apron because he's working on taking apart the device, I guess, looking to see how it works. And he figures out that there is a special transmitter somewhere sending signal to these receivers. They are receivers of some kind. Mm-hmm. And, of course, the fact that it's delivering frigid temperatures on that scale, it could only be Mr. Freeze, who's the source of these. Or, as Alfred says, the commissar of cold.
Alles klar, Herr Kommissar. I guess the German motif here is perfectly justified. When Batman describes this thing, wearing his rubber gloves, of course, he looks more like he's performing surgery than opening up like little bits of technology. He says it can only work if there's a special transmitter sending a staggering level of energy throughout the city. It took me a moment to imagine what that could possibly mean. Like, there's almost like a radiating battery that causes these things to do their work. But maybe you're right. Maybe he's not just talking about energy making these things do their thing, but rather some kind of cold ray that's being channeled by these things. It is interesting too that this feels very Batman 66 to me. Mm-hmm. That the point of giving these to everybody is that the more there are and the closer these devices are to each other, the more frigid the Gotham City becomes. Mm-hmm. And it enters a new ice age, as Mr. Freeze is very fond of saying. There is a return to the origin of Mr. Freeze here, where Batman once again expresses some, maybe not guilt, but shame for not having protected
not
Mr.
Shane,
Freeze.
But shame.
Yes. You say Robertson, and I say Robertson.
But, we get a couple panels of actual flashback, showing the accident that was mentioned in the George Sanders Freeze arc.
Mm-hmm. Of course he wants revenge.
I'm not so sure I blame him.
It was an accident, Batman. You didn't mean to knock that beaker of instant freeze on him during the fight in his laboratory.
The boy wonder is right.
He was the culprit, Batman, experimenting with those devilish instant freeze solutions, and for some criminal purpose, undoubtedly.
True, Commissioner. Nevertheless, I feel it's my duty not only to catch him, but with all the medical know-how at our command, to help that sorry creature back to a normal way of life.
Got me to thinking, that they never did that on the show. And I wonder if it was a budget issue, a time issue, or some other reason.
That makes me wonder. I hadn't ever thought about this before, but, were there not usually flashbacks in 50s and 60s television? I don't think that's true. I think there were certainly flashbacks on the Dick Van Dyke Show all the time.
Oh yeah,
but those flashbacks tended to take up the whole episode,
yes.
And there was just a little bit of framing, kind of dropped in here and there. But for a drama like this, it would be silly to say there weren't any, or this is some what we're seeing in the 66 show is some kind of trace of the exclusion of such scenes from 60s television. But with Batman, I think a lot of the scenes that are flashed back to are, scenes that, well, it probably has to do with cost. You're probably right. If there's any mention of, specifics of previous adventures, defeating a certain villain, they never, in my memory, refer to, or almost never, refer to shows that we've seen. They refer to things that happened, in the far past before the series began. And those would be expensive to stage.
Right. Yeah, although there is the bit in The Minstrel where they're mentioning other villains that they've recently fought.
Sure.
Or in the case of Clock King, who they will fight a little bit later in the season because they were filmed in a different order than they were shown.
As always, Batman, we'll play it however you wish, but we can't help being concerned about you.
Commissioner Gordon, after Penguin,
And Archer.
Clock King,
And King Tut and Catwoman.
and all our other artful adversaries, I don't think we'll have too much of a problem with this minstrel.
We'll just say they had, the usual bat premonition that comes to prescient detectives like these two.
But yeah, in that case, they were referring to things that we had seen. Archer and Catwoman.
Right. But nothing specific about those events.
As I'm editing this, I'm thinking of other references to past episodes that did come up on the show. Write us with all the ones you remember, and we'll discuss this in a future episode. Yeah, I'm not sure that I can think of any 60s shows where the flashback didn't take up the whole episode. I mean, of course, in Star Trek, when they did the menagerie, and they reused the pilot.
Right.
Well, of course, they needed framing sequence too, right? So I guess, it didn't take up the whole episode. They had to make it a two-parter so they could get the new material in and the old material.
Yeah, there wasn't much expense, though, insofar as, they had if they had the set of the Starfleet base already, there wasn't, there weren't any real special effects. It was kind of a bottle show.
Yeah.
They could just have Nimoy being interrogated and then have him show the film.
Yeah, the flashback was all already in the can anyway, so...
That was the cage, yeah. I think this version of Preminger that Williams has drawn for us has a much thicker neck than the actual Preminger. But hey, you can do anything in a non-animated cartoon.
Now, Batman drops the
U-coolers?
He drops the U-coolers into, like a tank of water?
Looks that way.
For some reason, and the two of them are closer to each other, and then they're generating a more powerful field than before. Mm-hmm. And we see that, the people in the park are now all really freezing, and their U-coolers are going crazy, and now there's a blizzard condition. Blizzard conditions are forming in Gotham City.
Yeah, there's a nicely composed panel at the top of the 7th page of the graphic novel, or the compilation I've got, where we can see, frozen people with these kinds of auras, almost like stalactite or stalagmite. I don't remember which go up and which come down.
Stalagmites are the ones that come up from the floor.
Right. So they look like they're trapped in these stalagmites. They're really jagged, and you see, a number of them in the background, maybe 5 or 6. You get a good impression of many of them standing around, even though there are only about 7 appearing to us. And, they're all standing around, they're blue around the edges of the panel, because they're, freezing in these things. But in the center, there's a volleyball net and the volleyball, and you can see, the kind of, yellow-orange aura of the hottest day of the year glowing over the rest of Gotham. It's a great juxtaposition, but it also gets us, to a more, it kind of sets up the drama, the visual drama of suddenly the fact that all these people are together in the park. Is this Gotham Central Park? It must be. And that that's the point at which I almost called them the YouTubers, the U-coolers, do their thing and join, I guess you could say, the fields of cold to each other when there's so many of them and they're so powerful and they're so in near proximity, and that's the point at which suddenly we have the new ice age that Preminger describes at the bottom of the page. Now they have helped me usher Gotham into a new ice age.
Sound like Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, I know. That's the only German accent I can do.
Yeah, because he wants. Does he say that here? I guess not. That's later.
Yeah, he says something. The premise or his ultimate desire of making everybody else suffer exactly as he suffers, but in reverse, comes up a few pages later.
And so we get the first Wild here on page 8.
With a very nice close-up of these big hard-boiled egg eyes staring out at the viewer. Wild!
So back to the Batcave, Batman and Robin are running to the Batmobile. Now, the fanboy me was complaining a bit because they do the atomic batteries to power turbines to speed, and Batman doesn't say Roger. He just says ready to move out.
I know, I was tearing my hair out.
Doesn't matter all that much, but still, it's not quite right. It's not the same as the Bat stock.
No. Maybe Parker wanted to change it up a little because he doesn't have to use bat stock, but he should not change it up a little. That's gospel to me now, I guess.
Yeah. So they come out of the Batcave and they run into snow and can't move the Batmobile. So they dig it out with bat shovels. Of course, he has snow shovels with bat insignias on them.
Of course, they're bat spades, though. They're not bat snow shovels.
That's
I'm not
true.
Sure what the issue is there. Batman doesn't have the right equipment for every possible season that might suddenly erupt in the middle of a different season? Come on.
Yeah, I guess he had that there around for gardening because it's summer, but bat gardening.
Right. The bat tomato breed, which is, of course, more robust than all others and defeats the weeds.
And in contradiction of the cover, they do not get a bat snowmobile, they get skis. And they head out on skis.
Jet skis, in fact.
Yeah, they do have jets on them. Now, there's a lot in this story that I liked as far as, like, civic responsibility Batman-type moments or encyclopedia Batman-type moments. And we get a civic responsibility one here when they pass a mail carrier who's up to his chest in snow, can't find his way to get back to the post office, and Robin says, just follow our tracks to town, and Batman says, the mail must go through. Because of course he does.
Of course he does. So they descend upon the frozen wasteland, as Batman calls it, the Gotham he's always envisioned, and that is Mr. Freeze. Then Batman and Robin ski over to Sprang Apparel. Dick Sprang Apparel, no doubt, former Batman artist of the 50s era, the goofy Silver Age.
Yeah, and so people are, at this clothing store wanting to get winter apparel, mittens and stuff, but the clerk says, we only have our summer line, madam, because it's summer.
Right.
And then they're concerned about whether, when Batman and Robin arrive, they're concerned that Robin must be cold with his bare legs, but he says, what? No, I'm fine. I have skin color bat thermal underwear.
Yeah, which feels like a reference to the show because, we know that Burt Ward actually wears skin-colored tights all the time.
Yeah.
On the show. Probably so they don't have to shave his legs, among other things. But I love the line just before that where the woman says to Batman and Robin, nice little low-angle shot in the panel of Batman and Robin arriving at the scene with Batman's megaphone. A woman says, it's Batman. Maybe he has warm outerwear. They just imagine that, if the heroes show up, they must have exactly what the civilians need.
And Batman says they need to destroy their U-coolers because it is a system devised by the villain Mr. Freeze that has caused this Arctic weather. And one guy says, but this cost me $2. Are you going to reimburse me?
Robin has a good answer. I'm sorry, sir, we can't offer you a rebate. We're trying to save Gotham. That's quite diplomatic, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of really good lines in this particular story. I think Parker's really, he's not phoning it in for sure. There's, clever things going on all the time in the dialogue.
Yeah, and aside from missing the word Roger, I didn't have any complaints.
Mm-hmm.
No addressing Robin as Boy Wonder.
Right.
On the very next page, Batman says, "It's a hard lesson, citizens, but nature is not a force we can easily bend to our whims. To attempt to do so inevitably brings us catastrophe, as we see today." So, kind of a moralizing Batman.
Yeah, ecologically minded Batman.
Green Batman.
Well, there's been pink-cowled Batman. Why not green Batman? Then Mr. Freeze, standing at the top of the building, the television station, I guess, that creates the waves of energy or radiates them, says, of course, ha 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 ha, wild, or vile, I should say.
He's moved into the former offices of Channel 14, which moved to the north side, Batman says. Mm-hmm. Freeze has modified the broadcast tower to send out his cold signals. And the people did smash their devices, but it's not enough because there are too many of them in town for just a few broken ones to lessen the cold.
Right. So here Freeze explains his intent. Quote, "The point is I was changed forever, so my environment would never suit me again. Everyone needs to know that pain if I must. Everyone." So he's, forcing everyone, like I said, to experience his pain in reverse. He's making them, have to live in an environment that doesn't suit them the way that he now has to wear a suit in order to, make the environment of normal temperatures suit him.
And Batman and Robin see that the fountain outside of the building is the water is just frozen. It looks like a palm tree. And Robin says, "Wow, look at the fountain." And Batman says, "Even with sinister machinations, there is still beauty to be found." It's another good Bat line.
Yeah, for sure. "Just as with a malicious mind, I have the hope there is still a potential for good." So he brings it back around. his kind of environmentalist quip back to Mr. Freeze and the problem at hand, which is also, quite smart.
So they're thinking about climbing the building. Batman says, "I brought our ice gear," but we don't get a chance to see what that entails because Freeze comes out of the ground floor like a garage door in kind of a tank. Like a military tank.
Yep.
And Robin says, "Holy heavy artillery." Freeze can fire from the turret and it creates ice, like a wall, not a wall of ice, but these big spikes of ice out of the ground.
Stalagmites. Yes, he calls it a snow tank. "My snow tank can shoot anywhere. You have no escape." So Batman and Robin trick him. Again, a great moment where we're one step behind Batman's plan. We don't quite know what he's doing until he's actually accomplished it. Batman and Robin split up on their skis just as Freeze is, barreling toward them in the snow tank. And once they split, and Mr. Freeze tries to fire kind of between them, I guess, Freeze initially thinks that Batman is really not so heroic after all because he's, moved away from his sidekick to leave him as a decoy or something. It turns out, though, that Batman had planned to have Freeze fire between them so that he would then block himself and kind of lock himself up into a bunker of ice accidentally.
He ends up surrounded by these ice spikes.
Yeah, the bird's eye view there, being an old Atari player myself, I couldn't help but think of Combat. The original pack-in cartridge for the Atari 2600. Tank barriers and all.
So then we get a bat fight.
With the sound effects kick and boof.
Yeah, kick and oof. Batman and Robin win, and then kids are throwing snowballs at Mr. Freeze.
That's the only wrong note I feel. Well, there are a couple of wrong notes, and they're both on this last page. One is that Batman has a huge Adam West grin on his face when he smacks this guy with an icicle at the top of the last page. It looks very Adam Westy, except that Batman would never be so happy about being, able to slap a villain or a henchman silly with, something as hard and excruciatingly painful, I would imagine, as a big, chunk of ice. The other wrong note is that after the pain that Mr. Freeze has expressed, not just his physical pain, but his kind of psychological pain, to end this with a bunch of kids teasing him by throwing snowballs at him just seems like, well, if you want to make certain that Mr. Freeze never reforms, that's the way you want to treat him.
Yeah. For sure.
And Batman rather callously says in the last... he gets the last line, "You've given the children of Gotham the most fun summer yet." With temperatures of, 60 below? What's going to happen is when when their bodies get below a particular temperature, they're all going to want to marry Mr. Freeze. Vile.
Lower the temperature in your beautiful body.
Exactly. Yeah, these are not, fun for kids temperatures we're talking about in Gotham City, I don't think.
No.
Well, all in all, a good story. It's spoiled for me a little bit by the last page, but not enough to make it, feel like a bust. I would recommend this as maybe one of the top 2 or 3 individual stories we've read since we started the series that really captures the spirit of the show.
Yeah.
Even though the special effects are much more expensive than they ever would have been in the show. Right.
Yeah, some aspects of the story they would just have never done on the show because they didn't have the budget or the technology, really. Right. I mean, now just whip up some CGI and you got it.
But as we discussed, you could count the number of even process shots aside from rear projection that happened on this show on the fingers of, I think, one hand, probably.
You like cheap comic books, right? Well, I'm Professor Allen, and I talk about cheap comic books on the Quarterbin podcast. In every episode, I'll dissect a single comic from my collection, as long as I paid no more than 25 cents for the issue. Forget about $4 new comics that you can read in 4 minutes, or crossover events that can cost $100 to collect. Join me in the Quarterbin, where even bad comics are a bargain, and good ones are a steal. The Quarterbin podcast is part of the Relatively Geeky Podcast Network. Visit us at relativelygeekypodcast.blogspot.com or search Relatively Geeky or Quarterbin Podcast in iTunes. I guarantee it'll be worth every penny.
Are you tired of fanboy comics podcasts? Looking for a show that really appreciates the comics storytelling medium and how it works? A show that looks at comics from any genre and anywhere in the world, comparing the storytelling techniques of different creators in different comics cultures, with manga, newspaper strips, European comics, and more, discussed alongside mainstream US comics. A show that includes talks with well-known creators like James Robinson and Dan Jurgens, and with less famous creators that you really should know. And hey, we'll even critique your comic. If you're looking for that show, then you're looking for Deconstructing Comics, and it's right here at deconstructingcomics.com. Also available in iTunes and on Stitcher. This is Tim saying check out our show on Wednesdays. That's Deconstructing Comics. So the backup story in this issue is called Cleopatra, which tells you a lot about what's in the story. Written by Jeff Parker, art by Joelle Jones, colors by Nick Filardi. This is a Batgirl story. Bruce and Dick are in it. And at the beginning, Bruce is in the hospital. Dick and Alfred and Commissioner Gordon and Barbara are around his bed. Bruce is kind of semi-conscious. He was found at the park unconscious, and the hospital has figured out that he was bitten by a snake.
A radioactive snake? Well, no, that's a different company.
Yeah, they found reptile venom in his blood, and then Barbara notices these huge fang marks on his wrist. Like somebody stuck 2 pencils in his arm or something.
And the panel in which she lifts it up is kind of strange because I guess it's not physically impossible for Barbara to lift Bruce's arm with Dick right behind her, but the hand of Bruce is completely in front of Dick's mouth, which makes it look like he's, kissing the signet ring of King Batman or something. So that's a little odd. There's another odd thing about the art that I'll just mention now. The minute the Batgirl puts on her cowl, suddenly her face becomes expressionless.
Yeah, I noticed that too. She looks so like she's hypnotized when she puts the cowl on.
Right? In the opening, her face is, very expressive. Now, granted, when you've got a character who's, part of whose face is covered, it always makes, facial expressions a little more difficult for the artist to render. Bill Sienkiewicz has, in recent years, I'm not sure if he ever talked about this in any interviews we read back in the 80s, but he says that, drawing Moon Knight was a real pain because he, Moon Knight's face was completely covered. And so trying to make his face expressive or trying to express anything through anything but his body was not so easy. So that's why Sienkiewicz always put those, kind of wide open eyes on Moon Knight, almost to produce a, cartoon character look, like his eyes are bugging out to express some emotion. But here, even her mouth goes dead once she's got the cowl on, and her mouth as well as her eyes are quite lively in Jones's renderings elsewhere before she dons the cowl.
Yeah, where she's Barbara. It turns out that apparently Bruce had gone to meet his lady friend, as Alfred says, Lisa Carson. Of course, there's some reminder of who Lisa Carson is. Of course, she was in the King Tut's coup arc of the show, played by Lee Merriweather. And yeah, that Tut was convinced that she was Cleopatra reincarnated. And is it revenge by King Tut? Well, he's... Okay, now I didn't like this mention of Arkham, because Arkham wasn't a thing at the time of the show. Tut is locked up at Arkham Institute.
Well, there has been some Arkham Institute stuff in the Batman 66 comic series before.
Yeah.
Wasn't the Joker there or the Riddler in an earlier issue? So they've introduced it into the continuity by calling it Arkham Institute. But still, it doesn't seem absolutely necessary to do that.
No, it kind of breaks the spell, I think. So Barbara excuses herself, saying she left something at the library. And she does go to the library, but she's looking up old newspapers and got more details about what happened in King Tut's coup.
Why couldn't you just go back and watch the episode? It's available on DVD now.
Yeah. Rent it from iTunes.
Well, it wasn't when the story was published, I guess. Right.
So then she goes home and changes to Batgirl. And yeah, then her eyes go dead.
She becomes zombified.
As she rides off in the Batgirl cycle.
And says, "Ha, look out, Gotham," while showing no emotion.
Yeah, the contrast between the word balloon and her face is stark.
So then she begins looking for clues. We don't know what clue she's looking for exactly. One of her pop's old warehouses, right? One of...
Right, John E. Carson.
Yes, of course.
Who isn't named specifically here, but yes, that was Lisa's father.
So she finds a clue that's an Egyptian eye hieroglyph, and she thinks, okay, so he's definitely using Alan Parsons' project album covers, for his clue. So if I can only find Turn of a Friendly Card, I'll be, that must be the next clue. Or is she using a chronological or reverse chronological album covers?
Yeah,
that was all I could think
or
of.
Ammonia Avenue, or
iRobot, yeah. If you believe in the power of magic.
So she's standing outside this warehouse, and then suddenly a trap door opens under her, and she slides down this tube and lands on some cushions in front of Cleopatra. And it's Lisa Carson, who for some reason, has decided that actually Tut was right, and she is Cleopatra reincarnated.
Mm-hmm. I don't find that psychologically convincing, considering how completely against the whole business she was when she, in the episode, in the episode arc, and also. I don't know. I mean, she seemed like, quite an adult when it came to inviting Bruce into her apartment for milk.
Milk and cookies. She baked them herself.
Yes, that's right. So, what we find out eventually is that, she's deluded or delusional, but she also is apparently looking for attention, which doesn't really seem like the character that Merriweather played in that arc.
No.
Now, granted, there's not a lot of time for a character to be established, but it gets established pretty well in the Tut episodes, so this all feels a little bit put on.
Yeah, it's not the first time it's happened in this book where they kind of screw with a character from the show, and, I think when we get to the mail a little later, I think there's a message from High C about the Zelda story that we talked about before.
Yeah, that's right.
Where, we'll get to that. But it's the same kind of thing, where just kind of unnecessarily messing with a character and in kind of an unconvincing way.
Yes, the character gets bent to fit the "wouldn't it be cool if" idea that Parker came up with for the story.
Barbara, or Batgirl, gets in a struggle with one of the henchmen, and then he ends up getting bitten by a snake.
Mm-hmm.
And since she's kicking other henchmen, and then... So Cleopatra's still got the snake, the asp, of course, and Barbara calls her Miss Carson, and she gets angry. Not Carson,
Cleopatra. Then Barbara kicks some asp.
Yeah. Well, it's like... Oh, I see. She's flapping her cape around and manages to catch the snake as Lisa is throwing it. Catches the snake in her cape and wraps it up.
And then there's this weird moment that I think is meant as a kind of kiss-off to Dozier and Company, in that Cleopatra, or Lee Merriweather, or whatever we're going to call her now.
Cher.
She does look very Cher-like. She says she's taken martial arts for years. I have more than enough skill to handle you. And, of course, Barbara walks up to her and just, slaps her, which makes me think about, of course, the fact that the producers didn't want Yvonne Craig to do any judo when she was fighting in bat fights. They just wanted her to kick like a showgirl because they thought that judo would be unfeminine or something. And so, that she's just, slapping Cleopatra to knock her out, and and it just suggests the end of the fight. There's no apparently there's no answering a slap, even when you know martial arts, or maybe she just didn't know martial arts very well. But anyway, maybe it's actually a moment where the fact that Barbara / Batgirl doesn't do martial arts is being presented to us as in this case it was actually helpful. Apparently, that she didn't know martial arts and just had to take a smack at her enemy.
Yeah, and then Cleopatra just says, "I surrender. Don't hit me again." And so Batgirl's got her outside, on the street where she was before, and Robin drives up in the Batmobile. Now, of course, if it's Batgirl, it's season 3, and Dick has a driver's license, so this isn't as egregious as it might seem at first. And if we're thinking about all those season 1 writers who wanted to have Robin controlling vehicles, that was a problem, but...
Sure. So the Batmobile is so foreshortened, though, it looks a little bit like a kiddie car on the top of the last page. And then, of course, there's another Alan Parsons Project album cover behind them as they start their perp walk. Batgirl brings Cleopatra out. Then back at the hospital, I wonder if this is a Batgirl story with Bruce Wayne kind of, lying around and moaning, lines from that he supposedly spoke to Lee Merriweather the night before or that evening. I wonder if that's because Joelle Jones doesn't do a great Bruce Wayne. The one face of Bruce Wayne / Adam West she draws on the first page really doesn't, it's just generic. She does a slightly better job of caricaturing Yvonne Craig, and maybe a little better with Burt Ward, but the faces are not all that close.
Mm-hmm. Some of the Alfred shots are pretty good.
Yeah, that's true. And I think her Lee Merriweather actually is somewhat decent.
Well, I don't know. Do you think that they even had the image rights to Lee Merriweather?
Well, I don't know, but I just think that Lisa looks the most like the actor who plays her of any of the characters here besides Alfred.
Okay,
Alfred is
maybe
the best, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe Jones is so just, wasn't trying for the faces, and so it didn't really matter one way or the other. But he should look it up and see if Lee Merriweather's legal team ever came after DC about this. I doubt it.
And so, Lisa is talking with the staff psychiatrist, or he's evaluating her, and Batgirl shows off her knowledge of the real Cleopatra, and Robin is surprised and says, "Who needs the Batcomputer? You're a walking library." Wink, wink, not knowing that she's a librarian in her other identity.
Yes, and she looks with her dead eyes at the reader in a moment that could be kind of ironic and funny, but if there were some expression on Batgirl's face of some kind.
It's better than the shot where she first puts her cowl on.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a bit of a... I mean, at least she looks alive. But she looks kind of too calm for the situation. Mm-hmm. She looks like she's standing there waiting for something and doesn't notice Robin's talking to her.
Yes, I'm posing in my 34C cup bra here, with snow cones attached, looking out at the reader. I do kind of like the motif of Barbara knowing a great deal about Cleopatra and about, just about everything else, including snake bites. That's nice. Sometimes that becomes important in the show, and sometimes it kind of falls to the wayside. But I liked the way that Parker played it up here.
Yeah. So, this story I didn't like quite as well for the reasons we've talked about, both art and story issues. But, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a perfectly good backup story, I suppose. But, I wouldn't want to lead an issue with it for sure.
No.
Hello, I'm Ken Holzhauser, and if you're looking for something new in comic books, may I recommend my newest comic, The Quick and the Dad, a love letter to the DC, Marvel, Archie, and Harvey comics of my youth. This comic has everything. It has spaceships, dad jokes, alien invasions, time travel, supervillains, and so many bad puns. Hopefully you'll like it. It's the cutest comic you've never heard of, and it's available today in print and digital from IndiePlanet.com. That's The Quick and the Dad. Join that other dynamic duo, won't you?
Coming up, Adam talks to Merv Griffin about whether being Batman is going to his head. Holy Deja Vu looks at actor Dan Tobin, and we read your mail in the Bat Inbox. This show is listener-supported through Patreon. Join us for $2 a month and get access to outtakes from every To the Bat Polls episode, including this one. Trivia quizzes on 20th century entertainment, recently focusing on 1970s pop music. And you'll get the right to vote on future Bat Polls topics. For $4 a month, you also get the right to have an ad for your own project on the show once a month, and hours of exclusive podcasts, including our walk through the early years of The Amazing Spider-Man, a new episode every month. So go to patreon.com/deconcomics and select the level of your monthly donation. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your support.
I'm curious, Adam.
Yes, sir?
Have you gotten caught up in your part? A lot of actors do. Like the fellows who were on The Defenders
Adam?
started speaking at legal...
You call me Adam?
Pardon?
You call me Adam?
Oh, Batman, I'm sorry.
I mean, call up my part.
Yeah. Do you feel sometimes you want to fight crime?
I meet crime wherever I find it, Merv. As a matter of fact, tonight is just a routine crime patrol. And To that extent, I suppose I've been caught up in the part. But no, Merv, no.
You're not interested in crime?
No.
Well, what are your hobbies?
Well, heavy industry.
I read about you a lot in the columns.
That's heavy industry?
Yeah.
I see. No, I like, for example, I found a great boiler room.
No kidding.
Yes, in Detroit.
Wow.
At the Coliseum, near where I was dressing my trailer. There's a boiler room there, and a couple of swell guys, run this boiler room. It's a real boiler room.
Wow,
Big
yeah?
things. And they came in one day. They knocked on the door, and they said, Adam, they said, would you mind signing this for the boiler room? And I said, sure. And I said, to the boiler gang, all the best, Adam West. And I said,
It rhymes.
Thanks a lot.
All the best, Adam.
For noticing that. I hope we can put that to music next time. But, so I asked them, what are you doing? They said, well, we hang this in our boiler room. And do you know in that boiler room they have JFK, they have FDR, they have luminaries like, I never even dreamed of meeting. And all of them have hidden out or used the bathroom in that boiler room when they've been speaking at the Coliseum in Detroit. So it's a fascinating boiler room.
Yeah. That's a fascinating
But it's a
story.
hobby.
Yes.
As a hobby.
As a hobby?
Yes.
Well, what would you do in a boiler room all day?
I'd go raving mad.
Now, my friend, this is all very simple. I'll show it to you again. Now, all you have to do is guess under which nut the spider is hiding. Of course, if you don't guess the first time,
Grandpa,
you could...
I showed the ladies my dress, and oh, good, you're showing the bartender the shell game. Don't win too much, Grandpa.
Yeah, that's not Charlie Hinshaw. Who are those people?
Those are the monsters.
Good heavens.
He's gambling with the bartender. She's gotten herself so stoned, she's joining the fashion show. You still want those contest winners in our club?
Petrie, I'm afraid I'll have to agree with you. But I'll tell you something. When that Mr. Monster shows up to play golf, if he doesn't turn out to be our idea of a human being, I'll throw them out personally.
Holy deja vu. Herman Munster enters a TV station's contest and wins first prize. Membership for the whole family at the Mockingbird Heights Country Club. Of course, it's a very exclusive club that only wants a certain kind of people. The board invites...
I'm sorry. No ethnic stereotypes or monsters, please.
The board invites the Munsters to some events at the club so that the board can check them out. Naturally, hijinks ensue in the first season Munsters episode, Country Club Munsters, originally aired April 15th, 1965, tax day. But one of the board members, a Mr. Reginald Stubbs, looks a bit familiar, especially when he puts his glasses on. And in fact, a year later, he would be the handler of the lovely Dawn Robbins. Yes, Dan Tobin is known to us Batman fans as Mr. J from The Penguins of Jinx.
Thanks, Wilbur. I'll get those prints to Mr. Eagle. He'll be expecting them.
I'm going up for air. It's stuffy in here.
Wait. I'll get you a rat. If you catch cold, it'll cost Mr. Eagle countless thousands.
Oh. What a boring, humdrum life this is. I'm not even a person. I'm merely a commodity, like soap flakes, like... Eek! Oh, help! There's guys from outer space.
Don't be alarmed, Miss Robbins. We're not lawbreakers.
We're here to protect you, ma'am. Great Scott! The Cape Crusader and the Boy Wonder.
Who?
Now, being a stranger to Gotham City, of course you wouldn't know. Batman and Robin, ace crime fighters.
Oh, gee whiz. Batman, you're kind of cute. Could you use some publicity?
I'm sorry, Miss Robbins.
Forget it. Batman never lends himself to commercial enterprises.
We're here to foil a daring crime.
A plot to kidnap Dawn Robbins.
What?
Me?
Tobin was born October 19th, 1910 in Cincinnati, Ohio. Early in his acting career, he was with a touring troupe in England and was scouted for a role in the play Behind Your Back at the Royal Strand Theatre. Quoting from Wikipedia, Tobin's most memorable roles were as the overbearing secretary Gerald in Woman of the Year, 1942, and the top-billed scientist in Orson Welles' innovative Peabody Award-winning unsold television pilot, The Fountain of Youth, filmed in 1956 and televised once 2 years later as an installment of NBC's Colgate Theater. Have you ever heard of this, The Fountain of Youth?
I think I've heard of it. I used to read a lot about Wells back in college, but I've never seen it. Don't have any idea what it's about.
In 1951, he married writer Jean Holloway, whom he met working on the short-lived daytime soap opera The First 100 Years. Holloway had written 3 musical films for MGM, but the studio refused to let her write dramas. So she moved to TV. She later developed the TV version of The Ghost and Mrs. Muir. Tobin and Holloway were married for the rest of Tobin's life. He did a lot of stage acting, which probably accounts for the gaps that IMDb shows between his earliest film roles of 2 or 3 years. His first film appearance was as a reporter in Footsteps in the Sand in 1939. Of course, it's all movies in the 40s, but then in the 50s he started doing many TV roles. He made multiple appearances on I Married Joan, Burns and Allen, Ozzie and Harriet, The Bob Cummings Show, and others, including 77 Sunset Strip, but not Surfside 6.
Oh, darn it. I thought we were going to hit the trifecta here.
Another of his 1965 appearances was on The Dick Van Dyke Show in the season 5 episode The Great Petrie Fortune.
I'm sorry to have kept you waiting, ladies and gentlemen. Will you all sit down, please? I'm Leland Ferguson, Hezekiah Petrie's attorney. Now, suppose we get this over with as fast as possible. These matters are never pleasant, and my wife has a roast in the oven. Now, it's been rumored Hezekiah Petrie was a selfish, mean, nasty, eccentric old man.
Nobody's perfect.
Your great uncle, mean though he may have been, left an estate reputed to total over $1 million.
Could have been $10 million if he'd have died a year earlier. I told him not to invest in 3D movies. One of us is going to get stuck with 10 million pair of cardboard eyeglasses.
That's the last season of Dick Van Dyke, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we only made it, my wife and I only made it through 3 seasons of Dick Van Dyke before we were just driven crazy by what a horrible marriage Rob and Laura have. But that's for a different podcast.
Later on, he appeared on such shows as Hogan's Heroes, The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, The Odd Couple, Bonanza, Barnaby Jones, and Marcus Welby, M.D. He played a lawyer in Herbie Rides Again in 1974. So, Disney cred.
Sorry, I was so hoping you'd say Herbie Goes Bananas. My least favorite of the entire series.
His last appearance was in the 1977 TV movie Once Upon a Brother's Grimm, and he died in 1982. But then had one more appearance when Orson Welles' The Other Side of the Wind, shot in the 1970s, was finally released in 2018.
Yes, it's a Netflix exclusive.
Tobin plays Dr. Burroughs. We're considering Tobin for membership in the Bat Bit Part Actors Country Club. He does seem to be our kind of people.
If you know what I mean. The Munsters episode sounds kind of incredible. I mean, usually the problem with country club newbies who don't belong in sitcoms from the 50s and 60s is that they're like, working class or, they're too eccentric. But that's all code for race, I think, because that's usually why people didn't get, why they got excluded, even if they could afford it or won it in a contest, as the Munsters did. Race was the problem, quote unquote.
It wouldn't be the first time that we had a bit like that on the Munsters. You know, there's an early episode where a couple of the neighbors are talking about, you know, those people who live next door.
Right. It's like the X-Men and mutant powers in the closet are kind of a great instant metaphor for homosexuality and the closeting of same. Monsters are a terrific metaphor for racial difference too. You can do a lot with that if you're so inclined. And obviously some producers were. Okay, so Bat Inbox, our first message is from Artemis Knab. I love that name, in part because it sends me back to a game that we played with old neighbors who we went to visit after they moved away, and we made up a chant on a tape-recorded message/clue to Batman. I think Bobby and I were the villains, and we said, bats in the belfry, bugs in the basement, let's go get a Knab, and then laughed maniacally. Yes, so clever. So very, very clever. Okay, so just wanted to say, begins Artemis, I really enjoy the episodes where you cover the Batman 66 comic. I hope it will be a semi-regular feature.
Holy validation.
Yeah. Somebody listens to the episodes where we cover the Batman 66 comic. Thank goodness, because usually we get very little response to those episodes, at least on the Batboard.
Yeah, well, I mean, this time, these... we forgot to mention these messages are about that episode. Well, as usual, it's 3 episodes ago where we talked about the previous issue of the Batman 66 comic with that Zelda story.
So it seems like Egbert, that is the twin cousin, the identical cousin of Alfred, has escalated from accepting petty bribes to assault, identity theft, and burglary after his stint in the Wayne Foundation halfway house for the halfway corrupt, right? Or is that what it was?
Something like that, yeah.
So just another example of how Batman creates his own villains, I suppose. Well, wouldn't it be great if there were a Joker moment for Egbert? You made me. No, you made me first. All right, and Batwinged Hornet has this to say. This was yet another 66 comic that seemed to miss the mark of how the TV series characters should act. Zelda returns to crime? Why? Her TV arc as a schemer turned reluctant villain turned repentant character made sense, all perfectly capped off with the final prison act of the episode, with one of Riddle's greatest cues for the series. Yes.
Goodbye.
Oh, wait, please.
Huh? Good heavens.
If you ever see him, give this to Batman. Please. Will you, Mr. Wayne?
Okay, I made a mistake earlier. It's Batwinged Hornet talking about it, not High C.
Okay. While recidivism should be a reality in fictional Gotham as it is in real life, Zelda was one of the few 66 villains who seemed to be truly sorry for her crimes and accepted her punishment, behavior usually reserved for Malls. Yeah, that's true. She's never really the villain of the episode. It's, more than...
Aval Ekdal.
Yeah. Yes, the fellow she's buying her escape tricks from. This comic flushes all of that away, seemingly just have someone guest star that was not among the big 4 or best-known made-for-TV villains. Regarding Egbert, well, he was in the comic. Shrugs. Once again, a backup story that was best placed as a backup story.
Yeah. Okay, and then there's a lot from High C here, which I've edited down a bit, but...
Okay.
He says, I think Pyre's story as you described it seems clever, and he came off terrific when you interviewed him. But I'd say this, were fans really clamoring for an Egbert story? This is almost like Season 2 when Dozier decided to make everyone in his Rolodex a guest villain. Just because you can graduate a minor character to villainy doesn't mean you should. Again, this may be a reason why the 66 comic didn't have a shelf life. It's sometimes read more like Batman 68 than Batman 66, if you get my drift. And then High C here goes on to try to fix Batman displays his knowledge, which suffers from forgetting about the college aspect of the first part. Catwoman goes to college. Mm-hmm. And he says, it seems to me the college setting exists mainly for Ross's Theta Beta Latke, throwaway gag.
Insert groans here for the next 16 minutes.
It's a sorority house with, wait for it, no sorority sisters. So dumb. This is what I would have done. As you guys said, French Freddy, gone. Also, Captain Courageous, double gone. This enables us to cast a couple of then young actresses as, sorority girls. Thinking perhaps Pamela Austin and Heather Menzies. Don't know, didn't look those up. Although Pamela Austin is kind of ringing a bell. I think she did come up before. I think she the one who did some car commercials in the 60s.
I'm going to look them up while you read.
Okay. Julie was so good delivering those mentor lines to aspiring henchwomen such as Pussycat and Enid. As much as I'm on record as not liking the jocular Catwoman of Season 2, I cannot help but laugh when she dismisses Robin by saying, at that age, all they're interested in is baseball. I think Part 2 could have been interesting if, instead of the dumb French Freddy stuff and Catwoman stealing with a gun, and as a footnote, he said, I realize the cat gun prop looks great, but Catwoman isn't supposed to just mean cat suit. It is supposed to mean cat burglar, but that was forgotten somewhere along the way. Yeah. So aside from that stuff, they should have kept the college motif. How about if Batman, again being soft toward Catwoman, asks rather than she being arrested for attempted murder? Amazing how that is never an option in Part 2s, now that I think of it. Obviously, there would be no show if it worked that way, but still, he asked for her to be reprimanded by Gotham University. Instead, she sweet talks and uses her, feminine wiles to convince the Board of Trustees by a vote of 7-1, the lone female is the dissenter, Natch, to not only exonerate her, but make her a professor of criminology. The board could be mostly extras, but the chairman could have been somebody who played oily and slimy types such as Edward Andrews, and one of the trustees could have been a nerdy type easily wowed by Julie. Think a Don Knotts type, but not Don Knotts. Maybe Wally Cox or, more likely, Woody Parfrey. By the way, Woody Parfrey was also on the country club board in that Munsters episode.
Right. And Wally Cox is infamous/famous for being a villainous type in at least one film I can think of, which is the original RoboCop, the Paul Verhoeven film.
He was also underdog, though.
Yes, well, he played both sides of the coin, I guess.
High C goes on, I hate to be stereotypical, but the dissenting woman could be the typical, well, I never type.
And would be on the Batman 66 show,
Absolutely.
no doubt. Absolutely.
So the deal now is she is going to use the college as the base of operations for her criminal endeavors with the full cooperation of the school hierarchy. A little more cerebral, maybe, but it would have given Newmar a chance to shine and stretch. And no pasta strained through a fencing mask.
Yeah, which is about as Borscht Belt as it gets without actually being like a Yiddish joke.
Yeah, although, I don't know, I really love the pasta and the fencing mask. I'm sorry, it's not the least bit Semplian, but I like that gag.
Yeah, I love this possible. I mean, this is basically a treatment for the second episode, but it seems like an hour-long drama, or at least in terms of the structure. I think it would work great, but they'd probably have to do it in 3 parts rather than 2 to, really demonstrate the infrastructural infiltration that Catwoman would get away with through her approval as a professor of criminology, which is a great idea.
Well, yeah, 3-parter and then team her up with, say, Archer and ruin the whole thing. But
yes, just to top it all off, put him in a fur coat for no good reason, like Michael Rennie and the Sandman.
Or put him on a burro and have him saying, Catwoman, wait for me, waitest thou for me.
Oh, man. That's going to give me nightmares for a month. Oh, God.
Okay.
Oh, again. So, looked up in real time, research in real time. That should be a new department on the show. Heather Menzies and Pamela Austin, the two women who could play, conceivably play sorority girls, quote unquote, in High Seas treatment for Batman Displays His Knowledge. So, Heather Menzies, wow, I mean, she has quite a record. Not a criminal record, of course, but she played Louisa Von Trapp in Sound of Music.
Okay.
And was also Jessica Six on the TV series version of Logan's Run. So, she was... she would have been about 18, I guess, in 1966. So she would have been, I suppose, prime sorority girl material. I'm seeing a picture here of her in Logan's Run where her hair could not be more like Farrah Fawcett's. I'm sure it would not be that way 8 to 10 years earlier. But she's also in a Playboy pictorial in 1973 entitled Tender Trap. TRAPP. It's like, you couldn't... Goodness, just the pedophilic implications of that for the Playboy audience made me not want to think any further about that pictorial. But Pamela Austin was born in 1941, so she would have been in her mid-20s by the time Batman appeared. But she was in a couple of Elvis films and was also the Dodge Rebellion girl.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, that's right. We actually watched some footage of her, I think. We watched one of her Dodge ads together where we kind of kicked it back and forth. She also, this is near and dear to my heart, in 1967, this is a Wikipedia reference, she starred in the adventure comedy film The Perils of Pauline, based on the silent Cliffhangers serial. So, that was, Perils of Pauline was one of the original film serials from the teens, actually, in which Pauline, the central character, comes to, a trap at the end of an episode. Back in those days, though, the real cliffhanger, that is, the woman or male hero is in a trap, and you can't know what happens until the next part when you go back a week later to watch the next part of the Perils of Pauline. Perils of Pauline tended to resolve its traps right there at the end, and then the next episode would be basically a kind of redo of the last one. Pauline is looking for the something, the great what's-it that's the most important thing that keeps her going for the entire serial. Snidely Whiplash somehow blocks her from getting it. She's in a trap, and then she escapes, or her boyfriend helps her escape, and then the episode's over.
Except that every episode ends with the same car going over the same cliff, right?
Oh, I sure hope so. Otherwise, why bother? Right. So anyway, they certainly both would have been good candidates for those roles.
So next time, another script, the False Face script, which was chosen by the patrons from among several scripts that we offered to them. So, yes, we'll be digging into False Face next time.
Excellent.
So, we'll be back in 2 weeks at the same Bat RSS feed. Check the show notes for the video of the BCV version of the theme, and watch for Douglas MacArthur. I'll also link to the 66batman.com thread we read from in this episode, and the thread for commenting on the False Face scripts, which are linked from that thread. Thanks again to David Maska, J.B. Anderton, and Chris Kavanaugh for the Adam West clip you heard in this episode. If you have any interesting Bat audio to pass on, or you'd like to make a donation to the show through PayPal, or you just want to drop us a line, the address is batpoles@deconstructingcomics.com. You can also comment on the thread for each episode and each script at 66batman.com/forums, or on our blog at tothebatpoles.libsyn.com. We're on Twitter at Decon Comics and on the Deconstructing Comics channel on YouTube. You can hear outtakes from this and every episode of To the Batpoles and vote for topics for future episodes by supporting us at patreon.com/deconcomics. You can also help us out by shopping via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon, by sharing our episodes on your social media, and by subscribing to the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. And spread the word. Let all your friends who are Batman 66 fans know about the show. Next time, false face scripts, outline, first draft, and revised draft. There's no disguising it. It should be a great episode. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. To the Bat Pulls is a production of DeconstructingComics.com.